Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And since it was mentioned that I lived as a monk for 15 years, I figured I have to explain why I lived as a monk for 15 years to get that out of the way. It's interesting because 2 years ago I moved out of the monastic order, so I'm no longer a monk. So while I was a monk, people always ask me, why did you become a monk? And now that I'm no longer a monk, people are asking me, why are you no longer a monk? So it seems like answering those questions is just a part of my karma, sort of. So before we get into mindful leadership, I want to share a little bit of my journey with you and also help you kind of understand why I came to doing what I'm doing, which is talk about mindfulness and meditation and how it can help corporations and individuals as in general. So I grew up in Southern California for the most part. My parents came over with almost next to nothing. We had set up shop on Venice Beach, very simple and humble beginnings. Within about a 7-year period, my parents established a multi-million-dollar jewelry business. I believe they worked 7 days a week. I don't know if they really took a day off. They just couldn't afford to take a day off. And so it wasn't long before we were really living the American dream. So this is the house that my dad built from ground up, actually, in 7 years from having nothing. It was a house, 6-bedroom house, pool, jacuzzi, a waterfall, and my bedroom window, which was the one on the top right, I had a postcard view of all of downtown LA. So that was there for a little bit, but in the early 90s, my parents' jewelry business caught on fire, and we literally lost everything. Yes, quite a shock. I was 21, my third year of college. My dad decides to explore other business opportunities, and he decides to go to post-communist Bulgaria in 1992, right when it had come out of communism. So my mom and I, we pack up our bags, we leave everything behind, whatever little we had, and we go off to Bulgaria. Now, we ended up going from that house to living in a 1-bedroom apartment in one of these types of buildings. Now, at that time in Bulgaria, hardly anybody spoke English. Like, you really couldn't find anybody that spoke English. Everything on TV was in Russian and in Bulgarian, so I couldn't even watch TV. All the movies were a couple years old. I guess they were pirated or whatever. They were just in the theaters. There were no basketball courts that I could find, no volleyball. This is the stuff that I grew up with in LA. There was, I think, one tennis court at the end of a town. I had to take a bus to get there, 45 minutes. Even the operator didn't speak English, so I'd have to walk to the post office and make a call to the US. So that was a time when I really went internal, started my own internal journey, and began the practice of meditation and mindfulness. This was about 20 years ago. Gradually, we moved back to the US, to the East Coast. After working in the finance field for a couple of years, I decided I needed to take a break and go on a meditation retreat to India, just to kind of clear my mind. So I ended up going to India and living as a monk for the idea was to be there for a month. I spent 6 months there, traveling around, living in a monastery with 40 other monks, waking up at 4 in the morning, meditating for 2 hours a day. I really thought I was going to freak out at this lifestyle, but somehow I fell in love with it. Right? Sleeping on the floor, doing simple services. Then I came back to the US, moved into a monastery in New York City, of all places, and decided to spend another 6 months as a monk, just to keep that experience going, because it was the most deeply fulfilling experience I'd ever had in my life. And it turns out that I ended up spending another 14 and a half years living in New York as a monk. So this was not part of the game plan, but I ended up spending a total of 15 years living as a monk. Last July, I decided I wanted to get married. Last July, actually, I got married. 2 years ago, I moved out of the monastery. So that's a little bit about my journey on how I came to, this is me as a monk in New York. Got to have that little cell phone there to match my robes. So one of the key things that we practiced and learned about was the nature of the mind. And this is my book, in case anyone's really interested in figuring out all the crazy things that happened in my life that led me to becoming a monk. So one of the key things I focused on, or the focus was to understand the nature of the mind. And what is the mind? Because if you think about it, most of our stress and anxiety comes from our mind. It's not so much the external situation, it's how we perceive that situation. So I'm sure we've all had an experience where you've perhaps had an argument with somebody, like somebody you don't like, and you're arguing with them, and you realize the whole argument was taking place simply in your mind. Like you were yelling at them, and then you were coming up with dialogue for them that they were yelling back at you in your mind. You guys can relate to this? Or just because I live in New York, am I the only crazy one here? Okay, so I'm hoping you've all had this experience, otherwise I'm sounding completely nuts here. The mind is really the cause of our stress and anxiety and depression. And mindfulness meditation can really help with this. So I like to compare the mind to a hard drive, which stores unlimited information. Everything we smell, taste, touch, see, or hear gets registered in the mind. But most of it we're not even aware of. According to Psychology Today, an average person has between 25,000 and 50,000 thoughts a day. That's about 1,000 to 2,000 thoughts every single hour. We're having so many thoughts, but we're not even aware of our thoughts. Like every 2 seconds, your mind goes off to something else. Right? And what is our mind doing? It's doing two things. It's either thinking about the past or it's planning the future. And what unfortunately happens is a lot of times the mind focuses on negative things from the past. Right? How many here are bothered by something that happened to them a year ago? In some ways you were hurt, but somehow you still remember it. Raise your hand if you, right? How many of you are bothered by something that happened 5 years ago? You happen to just remember it, not on purpose, but it just comes up, right? 10 years ago? 20 years, right? So the mind has a hard time letting go. But a lot of those things have no relevance in our lives right now. But it comes up. If you could choose, you would choose not to remember those things. But you see, the mind is on autopilot. So the point about mindfulness is to bring it so that it's not on autopilot and that we can actually have more control over what goes on up here. And if it's not in the past, the mind is in the future. It's planning something all the time. Even while you're sitting and listening to me, you might be planning an email. Some of you might be thinking about, I wonder what the lunch menu is going to be. How many of you are thinking about lunch accidentally? If not purposely, but accidentally, yeah. So, I like to think of the mind as like our smartphone. Right? And in our smartphone, whenever you have too many apps open, it slows the phone down, right? So you close them out. So our mind has a gazillion apps open. The food app is one of those that just can't close. It's one of those things that comes with the phone. You can't even delete it if you wanted to. So that one's just kind of open. You're eating lunch, you're going to be thinking, I wonder what's going to be for dinner. And dinner, what about breakfast? So that one's always there. But the mind is always planning. And a lot of times it's planning and becoming anxious about things that may or may not happen. What if I don't make it to my meeting tomorrow? Well, if you don't make it to your meeting tomorrow, then you're not going to make it to your meeting tomorrow. Worrying about it all now and losing sleep about it now is not going to help us, right? Or for example, let's say you're stuck in traffic and you know you're not going to make that meeting. And you have two choices at that point. Either to give yourself high blood pressure because you're not going to make it, or remain calm. But that switch is in the mind. We actually have the power to turn that off. And that's what's called mindfulness training. Now, there's a lot of scientific research out there on mindfulness. According to Forbes, it makes you more productive, right? If you can clear out those apps, won't you become more focused and productive? Absolutely. According to the New York Times, it enhances creativity and memory. Right? We forget things because we're stressed. We've got so much on our mind, so much on there that we don't need at the moment. According to Psychology Today, it decreases anxiety, depression, and stress. And according to the Harvard Business Review, it actually boosts emotional intelligence, gives us the ability to understand another person's perspective. Right? And how important is that? Not at work and at home, everywhere. And these are some of the studies, in case you want to look them up, right, that have been done on mindfulness. And you can read the research papers. And just some of the benefits that we've already kind of mentioned are stress reduction, boost to working memory, and I think we can all use a little boost to our working memory. It improves our focus. Again, another way to think of the mind is like a traffic jam. When you clear the traffic, then there's movement and there's flow. Less emotional reactivity, right? We all have a tendency to sometimes react emotionally. It helps calm that down. That can be very useful in a heated meeting. More cognitive flexibility and relationship satisfaction. Right? If you're obviously able to focus more, you're able to remain more calm, you'll have better relationships, personally and professionally. Now, so that's mindfulness. How can that impact us as we engage in a leadership capacity? Right? So, if we can have less emotional reactivity and better relationships, mindfulness will help us have more balanced emotions so that we don't lose our cool, especially in a workplace environment, working in teams. Lose your cool and it can really mess things up. It can really hurt relationships. So it allows us to remain emotionally balanced, more calm, more cool during difficult situations. It also will allow us, if we can remain calm and cool, to communicate with compassion. Communicate thoughtfully. Communicate with a sensitivity. Am I going to uninspire this individual by giving them whatever feedback that I need to give them? Is it going to be inspiring for them? Are they going to be uninspired when they go back to their desk? And also, it'll help us remember the very simple formula that we have 2 ears and a mouth. If we use them in those proportions, all our communication will improve. And by nature's arrangement, our mouth is naturally closed and our ears are naturally open. Someone's trying to tell us something. Appreciation, how important is that, especially in a workplace environment? According to the Huffington Post, employees who are appreciated will work harder, and those who aren't will develop a wandering eye. We all like to be appreciated for the work we've done. But how good are we at appreciating others? Do we have a culture in our team or our organization where we, even if we're not the leader, just go up to our colleague and appreciate what they've done? Now imagine if that can be a culture that we develop, where we start appreciating each other on a peer level, and the positive energy that could be created in that environment. Humility in leadership. We all may almost think that this doesn't go well together. How can you be humble and be a leader? Well, according to Forbes, a humble leader is secure enough to seek the input and talents of others and not feel threatened by them. And it's also, humility means to not think less of yourself, but to think of yourself less. Think of others more. So if we approach leadership in that capacity, that can be very, very powerful. And of course, leading by example. Doing what we expect others to do. These are some of the components of mindful leadership. Now, I want to use the example of Haruka Nishimatsu, the CEO of Japan Airlines. It's really interesting. At one point, he had to give a pay cut to a large number of his workforce, but what he also did was he gave himself a pay cut. As a CEO of the 10th largest airlines, there was a year where he only made $90,000 as a CEO of an airline. He also cut out a bunch of its perks. It's explained that he takes the bus to work, and he doesn't sit in an office. He sits with everybody in an open space so people feel that he's accessible to them. He lets people know that he's one of them. And when it's time for lunch, he gets in line and gets his own lunch. And he eats with everybody. Something interesting for us to think about, being accessible. And he's regularly appreciating the workforce, from the flight attendants to everyone else. Another example, I feel, is Tim Duncan, the all-star forward for the San Antonio Spurs. He retired recently, but before his retirement, what he did was, so that the team had enough money to bring on younger and fresher talent, he agreed to take a pay cut of 50%. That's $10 million a year. Over 3 years, that was $30 million less that he made. Now, you may be thinking, well, he's making so much. Yeah, try taking a $10 million pay cut. You try taking a 50% pay cut, and let's see then, was that a big sacrifice or not? But I think that's really leading by example. Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, introduced mindfulness and meditation into his organization, introduced to over 13,000 of his employees, because he also experienced a bit of a near-death experience. So he took it up himself and he introduced it, and the results that they're experiencing is that there's about a 28% reduction in stress that they're experiencing among the employees who have practiced it, and that there's a 20% improvement in sleep quality, and they've gained 62 minutes of productivity per employee per week as a result of incorporating meditation and mindfulness and yoga. Because again, it clears the mind, gives us an opportunity to focus more on the things that need to be focused. And welcome, everybody can do it. It's not just for monks anymore, right? It's not just for monks. People in professional athletes are doing it. Russell Wilson of the Seahawks practices meditation. Kobe Bryant did it for a while. Phil Jackson introduced it to the Bulls, to the Lakers, and I'm assuming with the Knicks. Ariana Huffington promotes it a lot. Mark Benioff of Salesforce also promotes it and talks about it and incorporates it into his organizations. So there are many organizations that are engaging in mindfulness and meditation for the purpose of creating a positive, healthier, and happier environment for their employees. Because if the employees are happier, then naturally there's going to be more productivity, and there's going to be a greater chance that the employees will not want to leave the company. So there are a variety of different types of meditation. Raise your hand if you've done some kind of meditation before. Wow, this is amazing. 10 years ago, this would not have happened. So, a variety of meditation practices are breathing, focusing on the breath, focusing on different parts of the body. And then there's mantras, which are audible recitation of sounds. So I don't really teach mantras in corporations. It may be a little too big of a leap right now. But what I do teach are the breathing exercises and the focusing exercises. So I don't know if you knew you were going to do this, but we're all going to go ahead and do some meditation right now. So you can have a little experience. If you haven't done it, this will be your first experience. And if you have, hopefully you'll learn a new technique. So I'll give you just a bit of an appetizer on some of the things that I talk about and teach. So please go ahead and just close your eyes for a few minutes. This will go for like 4 minutes or so. If you can't, put both of your feet flat on the floor. And now, just take a moment to feel the weight of your body pushing down into the chair. And try to keep your mind present. If it starts planning, just bring it back. Feel your feet pushing down into the floor. Feel yourself leaning back into the chair. Now begin to take a few deep breaths just through your nose if possible. And as you breathe in, feel the cool breath going in and really fill your lungs. Let's take nice and deep breaths. The deep breathing in itself has an incredible ability to release tension from our muscles and our mind. And as you exhale, completely empty out your lungs. Feel the cool breath going in through the nose, and when you exhale, notice that the breath is warmer. And if your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. Now go ahead and take 10 deep breaths. Inhale, 10, filling your lungs completely, and exhale, 10. Complete inhalation and complete exhalation. Inhale, 9, and exhale, 9. Inhale, 8, and exhale, 8. Now continue on your own till you get to 1. If your mind wanders, just bring it back gently. Try not to plan. Try not to think about the past. Stay focused on the breath. Now, breathe in for a count of 3, 2, 1. Now, hold your breath. 3, 2, 1. Now, exhale. 3, 2, 1. Now, hold your breath after exhaling. 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now hold your breath. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now do the same exercise for a count of 5. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe comfortably. And now bring your awareness to your forehead. And now let's take a moment to look inward into our mind and become aware of some of the different thoughts that are going through your mind right now. But don't get absorbed or pulled into any of these thoughts. Just observe them. You're taking inventory of the thoughts in your mind. Try to stay focused. Try not to start planning. Take a deep breath in. As you exhale, just empty your mind of all your thoughts. Take another slow, deep breath in and release any tension and stress that you're holding in your body and mind. Just exhale it out. One more time. Deep breath in, letting go of any tension in your face, your shoulders and your neck, your back. Now gently bring your awareness into your heart. See if you can feel the beating of your heart. Now just take a moment to feel grateful for some of the positive things that are happening in your life and for the positive people in your life that have supported you. Just take a moment to feel grateful for all of those things. You can bring your awareness slowly to your eyes, and you can gently begin to open your eyes. So welcome back. If you dozed off accidentally, that's okay. It's understandable. It happens. Happens almost every single time because the meditation relaxes us. So you can feel free to take 5 minutes a day. Meditate before going to work, at work, before a meeting, before going to bed. Just start with 5 minutes for 30 days and then increase it by 1 or 2 minutes. We don't want you to become type A meditators. 45 minutes today and then nothing the next week. Slow and steady. If you increase it by 1 or 2 minutes each month, you'll be up to 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the year. So any time is good, 5 minutes, and I wish you all the best with your mindfulness, your meditation. Thank you very much for your time and attention.